Can we start, ma'am?
Just give me a minute. Yeah, we are live now. And
I can tell you, but I was not sure whether you will remember it. But so you take a right, you you take a right on Miller's Road. At Miller's Road, first junction zone to second. First junction is that
I
Sophia
request all of you to please mute
one
your
way, which is correct. Second junction on the
systems.
right gearing key. The first signal that comes there.
Okay, Priyanka, maybe we can start.
Good evening, everybody. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Akila Sadasivan, a highly respected clinical child neuropsychologist and director of Samvit Psych Services. She holds an MPhil from NIMHANS and PhD from University of Canterbury, New Zealand. With more than 2 decades of experience in the field of mental health, Dr. Sadasivan has worked extensively with individuals facing a wide range of emotional and psychological challenges, helping build healthier and more balanced lives. Dr. Sadasivan specializes in working with children and adolescents with learning difficulties, ADHD, and other neurodevelopmental challenges. She has developed innovative, culturally relevant intervention programs that combine neuropsychological and phonological approaches and has been actively involved in training parents, teachers, and caregivers. Her approach combines clinical expertise with deep empathy, and she is passionate advocate for mental health awareness and accessible care. Today, ma'am will be sharing her insights on neural network approach to cognitive training, a topic that is both timely and deeply important. Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Yeah. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
that,
ma'am.
Priyanka. And it's so lovely to see so many familiar faces. Good evening and welcome to all of you. Lovely to see Gauri, Gayatri, Revati, all of you. So wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us. Mamta, I just saw your message. We are still in the process of putting together the curriculum for the second level of training program for teachers. Give us maybe 2-3 weeks and then we'll reach out to you. But thank you so much for your interest. And once we do that, then we're ready to go. And hopefully many of you will be able to join us for the program. For those of you who don't know, we've just recently completed a level 1 training program for teachers and special educators on child mental health. And those who attended level 1 now are interested in attending level 2. And that was what we were referring to. But let me try and share my screen. Please let me know if my screen is visible to all of you.
Thank you for the update, ma'am.
Yeah.
It is visible, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Okay. So today I'm going to be talking about the neural network approach or a systems neuroscience based approach. There's a slight difference between the two, but essentially we are talking about the same thing. Let us, try and understand what this is. Several of you either are already aware of this program, or you have in some form experienced this program and already know about the program that we do in or at Samvit. But the logic and the rationale behind it is what I'm hoping to be able to present today. This is, very sort of high level, nuanced intervention program that is offered by very, very few people around the world. And therefore, and it's a topic which is very, very close to my heart. And so, bear with me if it sounds a little technical. I would request all of you to kindly put your systems on mute so that it doesn't interrupt with the flow. And we'll definitely have, I know so many of you are so enthusiastic about this topic. We'll definitely have enough time for discussions later. And you're welcome to, at any point, unmute and ask me questions. Unmute yourselves and ask questions. But we'd prefer to take questions at the end. But if it's really imperative that you understand it, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask those questions, right? Or you can also put it in the chat box, and Priyanka, Arva, Riddhi, Srividya, all of them would help by going through the questions. Yeah. All right. So cognitive training is essentially what we are talking about, which refers to a form of intervention which is different from other psychological interventions. And people often get it confused with cognitive behavior therapy, and they think it's one and the same, or special education based remedial programs. There is a significant difference between cognitive behavior therapy and cognitive training. It's known by different names: cognitive remediation, cognitive retraining, cognitive rehabilitation, cognitive training, but essentially we are talking about the same thing. This is a structured intervention program that puts together a number of activities very specifically based on a specific theoretical rationale. And these activities are aimed at improving the cognitive abilities of an individual, right? So often, times people ask me questions like, will gardening help? Will, Sudoku help? Will working on crossword puzzles help? The answer to this question is yes and no. Yes, because any activity we indulge in works on the brain, and therefore, even cognitive behavior therapy, for example, will bring about changes in your cognitive abilities. That's essentially, how therapies work. For it to work, the brain has to reorganize itself in response to the environmental stimulation, but that cannot be construed as cognitive training, because cognitive training is a more deliberate act, right? That is done to improve specific set of cognitive abilities. So something like Sudoku, something like crossword puzzles, gardening will have some impact on the brain, but not necessarily the specific cognitive abilities that we are after, right? So, and therefore, because it does not improve those base cognitive abilities, it may not have a transfer to day-to-day functioning. With cognitive behavior therapy, on the other hand, you do expect changes to the day-to-day functioning, but the approach is very different. We don't improve the cognitive abilities, we improve the thinking and the emotions behind it. And that so the cognitive improvement that happens is incidental. It's not something that we really aim for, and therefore the orientations are different. With special education, the focus is on skills, the focus is on academic concepts, and therefore it might result in changes in cognitive abilities, but again, the focus is more on the academic skills and is restricted to the educational aspects. Whereas with cognitive training, it's a more global thing, and it's more, specifically the cognitive abilities that form the building blocks for a number of our activities. This was first reported as a systematic and a functional method of intervention, as a scientifically proved method of intervention in the 1960s, reported by Wagner and colleagues, who compared, or spoke of the efficacy of the training program of improving attention in patients with schizophrenia. And from there, then, of course, there were a number of studies that were reported. What we now know of cognitive training is that the specific structured inputs either focus on one, like Wagner's work, focus on one cognitive ability, which is attention, or maybe sensory processing, or maybe decision making, or can be a combination of work. In the earlier stages, they would focus on, maybe it was called attention training, memory training, sensory processing, right? It was not called cognitive training. Now we refer to it as cognitive training because of the advances in neuroscience, and we'll talk about it. So earlier we started off as focusing on maybe one or two cognitive abilities, but over the years now we have learned and realized that we cannot isolate cognitive abilities, and they're all more sort of um, interrelated, and they are dependent on each other, and therefore we work on maybe more than one or a combination of cognitive abilities. These are just some names, but there are definitely more cognitive abilities that one works on providing training across different diagnostic categories. There are n number of studies. If you just sort of Google and say cognitive training in neuropsychiatric conditions, you will see a number of people, research studies, and colleagues who have worked in this area. I've just mentioned a few of them. You know that specifically in our center, we work with autism, ADHD, and with learning disability. Although primarily our focus is with executive functions and training executive functions, we do it more in the context of learning disability and ADHD. And of late, we have expanded it to other diagnostic categories as well. Training varies from person to person. While I'm saying this, I'm also aware that there are very, very few people around the world. And I'm not just talking about India. India, there are even fewer people who do this. Around the world, it's a very, small set of people who focus on this. They can use different methods, either drill and practice method, which really essentially means that you do the same activity repeatedly over and over again. It could be paper pencil based programs where it's in person, one on one, or maybe small group, or it could be a computer based program like you have Lumosity, you have Cogmed, you have Elevate, many of these, some commercial, some more research based, some of them do only strategy training, where maybe they look at a specific set of skills, like maybe you're looking at the memory skills or problem solving, and use strategies like, if I want to improve memory, instead of improving memory through a cognitive training program, they look at giving you, say, mnemonics, or maybe a visual palace or a memory palace, and those kind of strategies to improve your memory, right? So it could be strategy, or like Tilwykes and Milwaukee and all of them have spoken of, there's a combination of cognitive training and strategy training that seems to be prescribed world over for many of these. Much of the work done out in the West started off with work with schizophrenia, and then moved on to dementia, and has focused on traumatic brain injury, or like we call them road traffic accidents. There could be other forms of traumatic brain injury. TBI, then there is schizophrenia, and then there is dementia, and work with elderly and normal aging, right? Um, if you look at some of the reviews in terms of the research, McGurk was one of the reviews that I was looking at. You'll be surprised that even though they found a number of studies that reported using cognitive training, only about 26 studies they were able to filter out which fit all of their inclusion criteria. So it doesn't mean only those studies, only 26 studies exist, but they were able to filter out and retain only 26 studies that fit all of their criteria, right? Of these 26 studies, the benefit of the cognitive training they reported was a moderate effect size. So a large effect size would mean that the program is very, very effective in improving cognitive abilities. A weak effect size means some cognitive change is possible, but it's not, maybe may not be global, or may not be to a very large extent. So in his studies, he found two things. One, weak to moderate effects, and the studies that used a longer duration, maybe over 6 months, over 8 months, had better outcome. And the third thing that they found was computer-based programs were far more effective than the face-to-face sessions, and also programs that tackle only cognitive abilities and don't have a combination of cognitive abilities and strategy-based studies. So he found exclusive cognitive programs, computer-based ones, were the most effective out of the range of 26 studies. A few years later, Tilwykes did another review, and this time she found about 40 studies. Again, like I said, there were more studies, but then through a process of elimination, 40 studies that fit her criteria between 1973 and 2009. And she also found moderate, small to moderate effect size, which essentially means that only medium level of progress in cognitive abilities was found. That means there is some change, but it's not a very large progress in the cognitive abilities. According to her, and in her review, she found that global cognition, which means not just specifically one or two areas, but in general, overall cognition improved, and specifically speed of processing and reasoning abilities seemed to work better. As per her recommendation and the recommendation of Wingrado and colleagues, they found that a combination studies that looked at both drill and practice and strategy-based training, those studies had the best outcome. This might sound a little confusing, like, McGurk said something quite the opposite, and then White's study is saying drill and practice and strategy. But Wingrado actually answered this question in one of their research works and their paper, and I'll talk to you about it when we come along. So right now we are seeing in general that even though from the 1960s, which is almost about 50, 60 years of cognitive training globally, all over the world, we only have moderate effect size. Why is that? We have not been able to establish a strong benefit of the cognitive abilities. If the program is well structured, if it is based on sound theory, if we now, through a lot of, imaging studies, we are able to figure out which are the networks that are available for us, which work at what time and what activity activates which neural network. Why is it that the improvements are often so restricted in the outcome, right? The studies or the training is restricted in its outcome. Why are the training benefits only small? Which of those methods were more effective? How can we explain what is the mechanism of this recovery, and what diagnostic categories specifically would benefit from the training? These were the questions that Wykes and colleagues were asking after their review. And Wingrado and colleagues in their article answered this question by saying that the systems neuroscience approach and in combination, the neural network approach to cognitive training seems to be the best way. In simple terms, what does this really mean? That the brain is connected with different parts of, the functioning of the brain is achieved through neural networks. The neural networks looks at computer stimulation, simulation, and assuming that, you create a model on the computer and then say, if this activity is done, these are the nodes, these are the areas that are activated. The systems neuroscience approach does real-time mapping of the brain, like send you into the fMRI, make you do some activities, or use different other methods of like FNIRS, MEG, PET, different forms of imaging while activities are happening, to EEG, for us to be able to figure out which are the networks that are active when we're indulging in different activities. And at the end of it, both these systems say these things, that one, the brain is connected through bundles of neural networks. These networks have a hierarchical connection, which means that first you have nodes, nodes then get connected to hubs, hubs get connected to small scale networks, and small scale networks get connected to long range or large scale networks. And this is how eventually it looks like. These white circles that you see are the nodes. Nodes are highly specialized cells that come together to do a specific activity. And then there are multiple nodes are connected. They're usually local, found close to each other in very specific localized regions. Many nodes together get connected to these hubs, which put all of the activities of these nodes together, and these hubs then connect with maybe from the blue purple area to this green area. If they're connected, those could be through the nodes get connected through the hub, and that could be a small scale connection. However, if this node has to get connected with this hub, then that can be a long range or a long scale connection. In children, if you look at how this happens developmentally, in younger children, there are more nodes and hubs that are found. As they grow older, there are more large scale networks. So the small scale networks get converted into large scale networks. And then for any given activity, the whole brain actually gets activated. And that is the developmental progression that we see from children to adulthood, where nodes become hubs and hubs become a small scale and small scale become large scale. So essentially, for any given activity, there are specific routes. Just like how if I have to, from Jayanagar, if I have to go to Kormangla, I may have 3-4 routes, but I might often take one particular route because that's the fastest access to me, or that's most familiar, or that is the one that is least affected by evening traffic, right? So similarly, the brain functions this way, where signals take a specific route to reach, and that's how the circuit is completed. Like, for example, if a given activity starts, this is the starting point, it may go all around and then come back to that point, and that's how a neural network is completed. So through cognitive training, what we are doing is there can be this localized connectivity that we're working on, or there can be a connectivity that happens in the large scale. Where deficits are concerned, according to the systems neuroscience approach, they say that because of the connectivity, if there is a maybe a disruption in this network, or sorry, the connection between these two nodes, there is a good chance that the entire network can get affected, which means anything that that network controls, any ability, cognitive, sensory, perceptual, any ability that that network controls can be impacted. And that's how you, like, for example, if you look at ADHD, no two ADHDs present with exactly the same symptoms. Same with road traffic accidents. Same with maybe schizophrenia. Same with learning disability. The heterogeneity or the individual nature of the difficulties largely present because anywhere in these networks there can be blocks, and that can then result in different cognitive deficits. So the brain is it performs these activities through these distributed neural systems. The important thing to understand here, that these connections are constantly working, right? So it's a very dynamic process, and this happens through the neuromodulatory or the oscillatory patterns. By neuromodulatory, I mean the neurotransmitters. So there are electrical impulses that are generated in the brain, and then there are neurochemicals via the neurotransmitters. Then this information from an electrical charge gets converted into a neurochemical charge, and then it becomes reconverted into an electrical charge, and that's how it's passed on from one neuron to the next, and that's how the circuit is completed, right? So this is happening continuously. For example, now you're listening to me talk, you're reading what's on your screen, maybe there's something happening around you, then electricity is gone, it's raining, or there's somebody at the door, multiple things happening. Your brain is constantly processing this information. So this is impinging on your various regions in the brain. In addition to this, am I feeling hot, am I feeling cold, am I thirsty? So sensory and perceptual happening continuously this bombardment of information. You are not aware that you're processing it because the brain is calibrating it, and it responds to it depending on maybe your motivation, maybe your emotions, maybe the demand of the situation. This ability of the brain to continuously keep changing and reacting to the environment is what we refer to as plasticity. Sometimes one exposure to an event is enough for the brain to recalibrate it and incorporate it in to its system to form new connections. What do I mean by this? Supposing you hear a sudden loud noise, right? And then you don't know what has happened. You run to the window to check what's happening, and then you discover that a bus has collided with a scooter right in front of your house. Now, this is, you've never heard this before, you've never seen this before, you may have read of it, but this is the first time you're witnessing it personally. Immediately your brain then recalibrates and learns to incorporate this, and this is stored in your brain in some form or the other as a protein synthesis. Then next time you hear a loud noise, your brain fetches this from wherever it is stored, and you compare this noise that you heard today with the one that you may hear in future to say, are they one and the same? Do I need to panic? Is there an accident? Should I go run down and help? Or is just a vehicle that is going at high speed and it's applying brakes because there's a road bump here, so there is no panic, and I don't there's no accident, and so I don't need to panic, right? So even a single exposure is enough for the brain to recalibrate it, and this plasticity of the brain is what we are making use of, taking advantage of this behavior or functioning of the brain in the cognitive training, right? So what we do is we know that the brain and these networks in the brain support sensory, emotional or affective processing, and that's what builds plasticity. So there is a learning dependent plasticity, and there is an environmental based or a training based plasticity, which means that on its own, sometimes we often refer to as spontaneous recovery, the brain can recover some lost functions. And sometimes voluntarily you engage in some activities, and that is your training based. So for example, if I want to become good in chess, I may intuitively be good at it. I may watch big people play, or my parents play, or I watch a computer and somebody else play online and learn. I might also start practicing it day after day to get better at it, right? So both are possible because of the plasticity of the brain. One is a learning based plasticity, and the other one is a training based plasticity, right? This training based plasticity is what we refer to as cognitive remediation or cognitive training, and it's applicable through a number of neuropsychiatric conditions. Some of these I've mentioned here, but anything related to stress, for example, is a more temporary cognitive decline, but something after stroke or after brain injury or after schizophrenia can be a more permanent damage. Despite that, despite the age, despite the severity, training does bring about changes. How do we know? The neural systems network approach tells us that there are multiple networks in the brain, and of these six networks are the most important, because most of our abilities, and especially this updating and constant revision of behavior, happens through executive functions or the cognitive control network, which is what most training focuses on, in addition to learning and memory, right? These six networks are the most important. Without boring you with too many technicalities, the frontoparietal network, salience network, cinguloopercular network, default network, and then the two attention networks, the dorsal and the ventral attention networks. These six are the most crucial, and this is like the most recent cognitive neuroscience theory that I'm talking about. The dorsal attention network and the ventral attention network are like, sister concerns. They work in tandem with each other. The dorsal attention network orients our response to whatever is happening in space. if we have to do something, the dorsal attention network is required for us to carry out that. So supposing, you're sitting quietly on your sofa and you hear the doorbell ring, you need the dorsal attention network to orient yourself towards this change in the environment, and then you respond appropriately by getting up and opening the door to see who's at your door, right? So this overt and covert, so some of it you may be aware, like the doorbell ringing, you are aware of it. Some of it may be covert, like you're hearing a scooter come and stop at your gate, and therefore when the doorbell rings, oh, that must be my brother because I recognize the sound of the scooter, but you're not conscious of it, right? So the dorsal network orients you to these kind of responses. The ventral network is like your speed breaker. The dorsal network, once you're oriented to an activity, your attention is focused till the completion of that activity. The ventral attention network, on the other hand, is the one that says, hang on, something has changed, so you need to change your behavior. So therefore, it's called the circuit breaker or the speed breaker. The dorsal attention network allows you to orient yourself and to continue on that activity till the activity is completed. But if there is a sudden change in the environment, the ventral attention network will come in to say, look, you've been doing this, but now you're cooking, you're stirring this vegetable, keep it on sim, and then go and open the front door because somebody is at the door. You have to open the door, right? So that speed breaker is brought about by the ventral network. One is internal, like I want to pay attention to this class, or I want to make sure that the curry doesn't get burnt, is the dorsal attention. That's, internally driven. So it's a top down. Whereas the ventral attention network is something responding to the stimulus around, and therefore it is an exogenous attention, right? And it's a bottom up attention. So there is an ongoing activity to continuously, like driving, to continuously be doing that activity, you need your dorsal attention network. If, as you're driving, you suddenly see a snake come on the road, you will apply brakes. The snake coming will activate the ventral attention network, which acts as a speed breaker and causes you to apply the brakes, right? So you can see how these two are important in the context of maybe autism, where they're constantly in their own world and they are not able to switch out of what they're doing into what is required, even if there are demands. ADHD, for example, either the switch happens too soon, or it's difficult for them, like they're watching TV, they can't get out of it, and therefore they throw a tantrum. So you can see how these networks are important. The frontoparietal network and the cingulo-opercular network are two networks which are very, very responsible and important for goal-directed activity. For us to be able to focus on a goal, to initiate, to plan, we need the frontoparietal network to be focused on a given goal. I have an exam coming in 2 weeks, so I need to put out my schedule, tell my friends that I won't be coming to play football anymore with them, and I need to include my study time during the time when I go out to play football, achieved by the frontoparietal network. For me to continuously sit down and study for the entire 2 hour period that I have said I will study, I need my cingulo-opercular network, right? To be consistent and sustain my attention over a period of time, I need the cingular-opercular network. Then comes the salience network. The salience network is a very, very important network, which is the switch, right? At some time, you need to focus on something, and sometimes you need to just relax and do nothing. When do you switch from one to the other, or seamlessly switching from one to the other is achieved by the salience network. So if somebody is, like, for example, I'm reading a book and I forget to eat, right? I forget to eat because the salience network is not reminding me that, boss, it's lunchtime for you, your sugar levels are dropping, you have to go and eat. On the other hand, I'm watching TV, it's time for me to get into action. The salience network will alert me to say that, playtime is over. It's study time now. Once I go into study, then it's the frontoparietal network that will take over. But the ability to stop entertainment and move in to a more focused work, I need the salience network to give me the signals, right? And then we come to the last network, which is the default mode. The default mode is how we know who we are. It's also the network that indulges in mind wandering. It's also the network that talks about rooting our behavior in a social context. It's also the network that allows us to anticipate how I will behave in a situation versus how someone else will behave in a situation, right? So, really, rooting behavior in a social context and also self-referential thinking, that I did this last time, my friend said this, oh, she looks angry, maybe she's upset because last time I did not go to her house when she called me, right? So all of this is done by the default mode, and you can see how daydreaming, mind wandering, all of this is controlled by this network. So really the three networks seems to be the root cause of many of the psychopathology. The three networks that we're talking about is the salience network, the frontoparietal network, and the default mode network. And remember, all of this is happening in real time, and there is a dynamic interaction between these three. What does it mean? Now, the default mode is referred to as a task negative network, while the frontoparietal or the central executive network is referred to as a task positive network. What this really means is when I'm indulging in a task, teacher is teaching in class, she's giving instructions, I need to focus on what she is saying. That is the frontoparietal network. When the teacher is out of the classroom, then I need to sit quietly and maybe be lost in my thought. That is the default mode. So this frontoparietal network is required to focus on a task. When there are no tasks, the default mode should kick in to help us stay calm and wait for instructions. The moment instructions come, we've got to switch from inaction mode to action mode. And that switch should come by the alerting system of the salience network. So the salience network actually acts as a switch for us to be able to switch seamlessly from one to the other. Interestingly, when the central executive network or the frontoparietal network is activated, the default mode cannot be active. If the default mode is active, then it's difficult for the frontoparietal network to be active. So keeping both of them engaged probably is something that through meditation, people who constantly meditate, uh, they are able to achieve it. Interesting, right? So that is the possible because of the plasticity within the brain, right? So this salience network, obviously, the switch is what often is reported as being causing a problem in autism, whereas in attention deficit or ADHD, it seems to be the default mode and the salience mode. With learning disability, it's probably the uh, frontoparietal network and the salience network that seems to be a problem, right? So with each condition, this changes. By and large, the core cognitive abilities that are affected in many of these abilities seems to be the cognitive control, or what we call as the executive functions. And I'll talk to you about what those are in just a bit. But it's the frontal or the prefrontal cortex in general through these six networks that are responsible for the smooth sailing of each of these functioning. You can see how important these are because anything and everything we do, they are ascribed to any one of those six networks that I just spoke about. But they're not isolated, they're all interconnected, and they are dynamic, which means like if you see the anterior insula is present in the salience network, is present in the dorsal attention network, and is also present in the singular opercular network. So it's the same areas in multiple networks, which means there is some overlap in the functions, but depending on what we are doing, the specific other regions that are associated may take over, and therefore even though they are independent networks. They are not completely independent of one another. They are interdependent and they are dynamic, right? So many of them speak of these two different kinds of networks. One are specialized processors, which focus on select functions like the nodes. And then you have a global workspace, which is the long range connectivity, which then talks of the whole network, like the salience network or the default mode network, which connects maybe the cortical and the subcortical regions in the brain. Both these are present. And according to Bart's, there is a hierarchical flow, which means it starts off with more specialized processors initially for an activity, but for it to be successfully completed over a period of time, you need to have a more global workspace or the long range connectivity, which means that all of these cognitive abilities have to be intact for us to be able to have a smooth sailing functioning. Attention, working memory, mental flexibility, and impulse control or inhibition. And these are the four core areas that now we know that if we focus on them, many of those psychiatric or neuropsychiatric conditions that we spoke of earlier, they can be they all present with cognitive deficits in one or more of these, and if we train them, we are able to bring about symptomatic relief on this. What do we now know based on systems neuroscience and the network approach? That there is learning based plasticity which is constantly shaping our behavior. Learning induced and training induced plasticity is present, and this can be harnessed, and it's present throughout the lifespan. People think that only by age of 5, only by age of 10 training is possible. Even at the age of 90, training is possible. There are a number of models, and I'll present to you several studies that talk of this kind of intervention. So interventions that stimulate and trigger the entire network is what seems to be lacking in the previous studies that we spoke of. We need to train lower levels of cognitive abilities. As they strengthen, they will impact the higher level cognitive abilities. Some of them look at training lower level and then going up the ladder. Some of them look at training the higher level, like say decision making and problem solving. And for them to get better, the lower levels automatically have to get better. So you have a bottom up or a top down model. Some model, like our model, makes a combination of these two methods where we train two or more cognitive abilities simultaneously, and they seem to be working well. The way they achieve this is through cholinergic, dopaminergic, and non-adrenergic neuromodulation, which means that these are the neurotransmitters that respond to the training, and through reward and improved motivation, we are able to bring about overall a better learning experience. At this point, also want to tell you that both the singular opercular network and the salience mode network respond well to strategy based training, and the training is both implicit and explicit, which means I am learning a skill and I'm using this knowing that the skill will achieve best results is one learning. The other learning is without realizing it, I figure out that this is the best way to do it. And then later on, I realize, oh, hang on, how did I do it so easily? Maybe because I use this strategy, right? So both need to be operating a feed forward loop and a feed backward loop, which happens in both implicit and explicit learning, which is why Tilweich's research said that we need both the kinds of intervention programs which look at one, training the lower level cognitive abilities, and two, also looking at strategy based learning, which can then bring about a combination of these two, and overall this works, right? So again, number of studies that have spoken of maybe with language disorders in children. Talal started with that. It's called fast forward. And then Smith used the same training program to look at speed of processing in the elderly. And then other studies looked at different kinds of processing on healthy aging, dementia, mild cognitive impairments, schizophrenia, substance abuse, anxiety, and depression. Across the board, we've had several studies that have reported progress. Now, to sort of briefly tell you about the work that we do at Samvit, We have consistently been training and improving executive functions. We do a baseline assessment, look at their profile. Pretty much we know that, most of these functions, that is attention, working memory, impulsivity, and mental flexibility, are the areas. Sometimes, depending on what other issues are presented, we may work on memory, we may work on language, we may work on problem solving and planning and decision making, depending on the kind of problem. So the assessment is for us to understand the wide range of issues that the individual is facing, current level of functioning across these, and then we present them with activities that are presented in a very systematic manner from a level that is taxing and currently, slightly higher than the level that the individual is functioning now. And from there, then we improve or increase the difficulty level. And that's the best way for the program to work. Right. So we present activities starting at a level. So each activity, for example, that we have, we've divided them into 6, 7 levels of difficulty, let's say, arbitrarily. If I'm at level 2 for a given activity and somebody else is at level 4, then regardless of the age, regardless of the diagnosis, for me, the activity will start between level 2 and 3 because I'm at level 2, and somebody else who's at level 4, the training program for the same activity might start between levels 3 and 4 because I need to be challenged for my brain to respond. So starting at a level that's slightly above the functioning of the child or the individual, and then progressively increasing the difficulty level as they reach mastery. How do we know they've reached mastery? We set targets, maybe time, maybe accuracy, maybe speed. Many of these we use as as targets. We give them feedback, and if they're able to 80% of the time reach the target, then we shift to the next level of difficulty. As the brain starts improving, this level of difficulty becomes easy for them. They are able to meet the targets, and then we move on to the next level of difficulty, right? And that's how, just to go back to the previous slide, over a period of time. So oftentimes people say, how long do you have to keep them in the intervention? With restricted, simple problems, by simple, I mean maybe only one area of deficit or a few select areas of deficit, a shorter program is enough. However, if there are global issues, then we might have to keep them for long, 2 years at best or 3 years. Otherwise, 3 to 6 months is enough to bring about change. And we see in this order the improvement happening. Motivation and insight into what they're doing seems to respond first. Then comes attention, and then maybe working memory, and then writing impulsivity seem to be the last to improve. Somewhere in the middle of all of this, the academic functions improve. Also, it's interesting to note that these are permanent changes. Once they reach a certain level of progress, unless they've stopped the program too soon, they seem to maintain the progress at that level, but they may not make further gains, and we may have to give them further inputs. Just to talk to you about a child that we had seen maybe about 3 years ago. He was in grade 8 at that time when he came to us, going to grade 9. He had just stepped into grade 9. So end of grade 8, beginning of grade 9 was when he was brought to us. The mother and the school did identify that he had problems starting in UKG. There were letter reversals. He was struggling to learn the letters, and so special education was provided. With that, till grade 3, his spellings, where he was struggling, that seemed to improve. However, by the time he came to grade 6 and 7, his performance started dropping, and he started failing in subjects. And at this time, he stopped going out with his friends, and he started withdrawing, and his screen time increased as a means of compensating for this. That's when the mother came to us, because he would be hitting exams soon, and she was really worried because the school was saying, I don't think he could do very well in our school. Please take him to another school. Maybe a special school would be good. And then we did a short program with him, about 7 months. And you can see that, even though he was not very, very low on many of these to start off with, this is his verbal comprehension before the intervention. his perceptual reasoning, working memory, processing speed. So you can see, working memory and processing speed were low. Um, and his IQ, though, was in the average range. After the training, suddenly all of these areas shot up. Significant change in working memory, processing speed, and therefore the full scale IQ. So it's not that our training program made him smarter than what he was, but it removed the obstacles by improving his speed and also improving his working memory, and therefore his IQ score improved significantly. Specific cognitive abilities, if you look at it, attention, uh, post the intervention, his attention scores improved quite. Uh, this is the random attention, this is the overall attention, this is the structured attention. Not much of change there, but significant change here. Similarly, on the Stroop, the number of words that he read in 45 seconds improved quite significantly after intervention. And then, the number of the time taken reduced only marginally. So speed was not that great an improvement, but his accuracy improved, and the time taken considerably dropped for mental flexibility, which means that he was more flexible. Behaviorally, the mother reported anger reduced. He The only thing that he would grumble about was his writing, but then successfully he finished his 10th, and this year he's probably taken his 12th exam, or he will be taking his 12th. I'm not able to recollect. Probably he's giving his 12th this year, right? So what we're saying is we've seen him only for 7 months, and we trained him across all of these activities. And because he was in high school, we also went up to planning and organization, and we were able to achieve quite a bit in a short span of time because we focused on the whole neural networks rather than looking at only attention, only this or only that, right? So through cognitive training, it is possible for us to bring about these kind of changes. We set targets depending on the level at which the child is functioning now, regardless of age, regardless of what the diagnostic category is. And then we review these weekly, wherever possible, but definitely monthly, we review the activities, and then they are changed. You must understand, when I say these activities are changed, it's only the same activity, but in increasing level of difficulty. So there is a certain repetitiveness, which is why it's called the drill and practice method, because we do present the same activities over and over again, but the targets that are set keep changing, and we make them more difficult as time passes, right? I'll come back to this. If we have time, maybe after answering questions, we can do a quick activity. But we were doing our activity only as, an in-person activity. They had to come to us. But since the pandemic, we've changed. We've done also online, the same activities, we do it online. And now we also have it as an app. So for those of you who are interested, you can check out this app. This doesn't work on Android phones, unfortunately, but sorry, doesn't work on iOS phones, the iPhones, but it works on Android phones and tabs. You can download it. You have about 10 games. There is also an inbuilt assessment, which is voluntary. If you want, you can take the assessment. Otherwise, you can straight away do the activities. 3 of them are free, but the other games you have to subscribe. And it's a monthly subscription. You can renew your subscription. Spending about 25 to 30 minutes on the tasks that you find difficult at the level you find difficult seems to produce significant changes. And those of you who are interested, we can talk more about this. And at the end of it, this is how we are able to monitor progress. The blue line is the number of times they have tried a given task, and the red line is the accuracy. So this is at a lower level of difficulty. You can see initially the accuracy is really low, but by the time the program has uh, progressed for over a month, all these dots represent the number of sessions that the individual has worked on this. She was able to achieve, almost parallel and quite a significant improvement from, let's say, here she may have 0 correct answers, but here she has about 16 correct answers for the more number of tries. initially and all of this is say in 1 minute. In 1 minute, she was only able to try 3 times that particular activity, of which she got one correct. Whereas by the end of the month, she tried 24 or 25 and she's got about 15 or 16 correct. So you can see her speed increased. The same task, and this is on Rebuy I'm talking about, the same task at a higher level. So that was level 1, what you saw the first graph. This is level 3. You can see already level 3 for the same 1 minute, she was able to try about 5 and got 0 correct in the beginning. This is from level 1 to level 2 and she's gone on to level 3. And towards the end, she's still struggling to reach accuracy. And you can see a huge gap. So clearly, this is where she should be spending a lot of time. But for various reasons, her work picked up and she couldn't continue with this. But if she had continued, we would have been able to map her progress, right? So existing cognitive training programs have been able to indicate to us that it is possible to improve cognitive abilities. The systems-based approach or the neural network-based approach gives us a lot of insight into what we need to focus on. Executive functions, cognitive control seems to be holding the key, but we still don't know how it is achieved. We do know a little bit, but we need more uh, proper controlled, randomized control designs for us to be able to arrive at the conclusion to say this is the mechanism of improvement and what are the specific um, you know components that help improve abilities faster in some people versus for some, like some children we know, when we see them, 3 months is a good enough time to bring about a huge change. Like, the child that I spoke to you earlier, 7 months was a fantastic turnaround for him. And he there were difficulties that he continued to present, like writing was still not an area that he was very comfortable with, but overall he became so much more independent in his functioning, right? But what are the factors that made him progress in 7 months, while other children we are seeing for over 2 years and we still see only minimal progress? So, if we know the mechanism of progress, we will be in a better position to say how long for each individual and what is the mechanism of recovery, and how can we refine this further for individuals, right? That's where we are at. I'll stop here, and I'm happy to take questions. And if time permits, maybe also run you through one or two activities so that you get an idea of what our program actually looks like. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Ma'am, Shruti here.
Yes,
Just
Shruti.
one question.
Mhm.
I think very interesting topic. So I have been trying to study brain for my son who has
Mhm.
autism and ADHD.
Sure.
So one thing I want to understand is you spoke about neural networks and all of that. Very
Mhm.
new to me still, but
Mhm.
I'm just trying to understand: is there a network problem or is there a teaching problem? Because for a lot of neurotypical children, also they find certain concepts difficult to pick up,
Yes.
right? And we don't always say you have a network problem or something like that.
I
So
hope you don't.
yeah. So how do we know that our child actually has some network problem, or it's a teaching methodology that probably is not working for the child?
Right. Interesting question. The way I would answer it is you probably would not know for sure that the child has a network problem or not unless you use those imaging techniques while the person is performing an activity and then compare it with known ways of functioning. So these are theoretically, we know that these are the areas that are different, and we take large numbers of people, observe them, and compare them with typically developing people, and that's how there's always that statistical thing, that is a procedure that is done, and you sort of average it and you lose out on that individual quality. So it's difficult to say whether the difference is an individualization of a learning method or it's a deficit, right? But through tests we will be able to say whether there is a deficit or not, because these are standardized um tweaks or standardized probes which will allow us to identify whether this is a deficit or an individual difference. Once that is established, then you can look at providing inputs. Uh, why do I say that? Like if I give you something to remember, you may remember it using an auditory modality. I may remember it using a visual modality. And if both of us are assessed on something visual and something auditory, our scores may be different. They may not be deficits, but the difference may be because of our individual learning styles. But for somebody with a disorder, there will be a clear deviation from this. Some skills may be in the average range, other skills may be subpar, and some other skills may be impaired. When we do an assessment, we will be able to say whether there are deficits in these areas. And based on the deficits, we will then assume that these are the networks that are not functioning properly. And then we go into the intervention, which is why always any good psychologist or neuropsychologist, the starting point will be with an assessment.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, I have 2 to 3 questions.
Sure.
One, how does increased screen time impact the neural networks? Second, when it comes to like when you were talking about attention, then in children on the spectrum, we find a lot of difference between attention to people versus attention to the activity. And once you work on active social engagement, then we find it having a ripple effect in all other areas of development. So how does that, what network does that trigger the active social engagement, and how does it then in turn have an impact on all other networks, because we see a ripple effect in all other areas of development, though we directly don't work on it.
Right. Beautiful question, Aradhana. Trust you to come up with such a nuanced question. Sorry, did you have another question? I interrupted you.
Yeah. Once you're done with this, then like I'll give others the chance, because there are others
Sure.
waiting. If I have time, I will ask them.
Sure. Your first question was about screen time. Screen time has a significant impact on executive functions. It wipes off the functioning of the executive functions. The longer the screen time, the more the deficits. There's no doubt about it. However, the good news is that the moment you wean off the screen time, these changes are reversible. So if you wean off of screens and get back into a routine, you will be able to recover from some of the damage, provided you don't have a diagnosis. Like if it's a typically developing person, they stay off of screens, then there is a significant progress in their executive function. So screen time, the longer the screen, the smaller the screen, the longer the screen time, much worse is the cognitive abilities. So that's the answer to your first question. The second question, the neural networks-based approach, or the systems approach, does explain this very well. With autism, for example, it's the anterior insula that is responsible for this routing of behavior in a social context. Overall, their cognitive abilities, or rather executive functions, which we call as a cold cognition, is intact. They have problems with social cognition and emotional reactivity, which is the hot cognition. And the anterior insula, especially the right anterior insula, is responsible for this. And that is part of the salience network, the cingular orbicular network, and the frontoparietal networks. So when you work on those, if you, for example, you're working on the social cognition, you're actually working on the insula. By regularizing the function of the insula, targeting
I'm
these three
sorry
networks.
for interrupting at this stage, but I've read that once you work on active social engagement, it triggers the ventral tegmental area.
It does.
So how does that
That's part of the
come into play?
salience network, right? It is, if
Okay.
you go back to my slides, you will see that it's there.
Okay.
So the whole,
Thanks.
by working on, you don't work on one area, you're working on the whole network. So there's better connectivity within the network, and therefore overall functioning improves.
Thank you
Even
so
the
much.
ones that you don't focus on.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I think Satyanarayana has been waiting for a while. Thank you for raising your hand and waiting patiently. You
Good
can
evening,
un Yeah, good evening.
My name is Satyanarayana. He is
Mhm.
my son, Aditya Krishna, sitting next to me.
Hello.
Mm. So actually, I would like to have assessment to be done. In fact,
Mhm.
he passed out his 12th class from through NIOS with the help of a scribe.
Okay.
Kind of, no taglines to be told and all. Is Both swings are there, and he is having some kind of, when I went through some of the charts, some first point was mentioned by the motivation.
Mhm.
He lacks, self-esteem, very low self-esteem, though he's having capacity and ability,
Mhm.
which I feel as a father. I'm a single parent.
Sure.
So I would like to meet you in person along with him
Sure.
for a better assessment, It is, I should not go by guessing.
Sure. Sure.
So
We
if
would
you,
be happy to help you.
thank you.
If you have our contact details, you can reach out. Otherwise, I request either Arva or Riddhi or
My daughter-in-law has referred, in fact, she only shared
I
uh,
see.
this program to me.
Okay, sure. So
So,
you would know
yeah,
how to reach out.
I'll take from her.
Sure.
And I stay in Hyderabad, but I would love to meet you with
Sure.
him so
Sure.
that, you can actually see him and assess him where I need to.
Sure.
Uh,
We also have a person in Hyderabad who does this program. She's been trained by us.
uh
So she can also do the assessment, or you're welcome to come and meet us. Whatever, both are possible.
Beautiful, beautiful. If somebody is there in Hyderabad, I will go through that. Even
Sure.
then, also, I would like to meet you. Uh,
Fantastic.
let's see how it goes. Like, I'm not having big target. I wanted, let him be independent kind of a thing. He's a good musician. He Carnatic music and all. He
Sounds
sings.
good.
He learned through his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Auditory functions are very high for him.
Sure. Sure.
So I just wanted to
Sounds good. We'd be
take
happy
your
to help.
advice to make him independent. That's all.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ma'am, one quick question.
Yes,
Can
yes,
this
Shruti.
child do cognitive training along with school? Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
okay,
It would definitely help.
okay. And we can come and talk to you about how do we space out school versus, the training timings and all that.
Sure, sure. Yeah, we can work that out for you. How old is your son, Shruti, now?
He's 9.5 now.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's really
grown.
grown.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So now is a good time for us to actually focus on working with him and his cognitive abilities.
Okay. I'll set up some time and bring him for assessment and see how
Sure,
we can take it forward. Thank you,
sure.
ma'am.
Sounds good. Thank you. Any other questions?
If there are none from others, can I ask?
Ma'am, I have a question. Can I just,
Yes. Sure, sure.
yeah,
Yes, Nandini.
I teach in a college.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that we very often deal with is that there are a lot of children who come to us with learning disorders, or there are children with other disabilities also. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem is that I feel when it comes to college level, we are not really equipped, because I think there is a very strict, you know, uh, training that is expected from school teachers, but college teachers are very honestly, not equipped to teach children with multiple disorders that very often we encounter. So, is there any guideline, or is there a method that is meant for pedagogic method that's meant for adult with learning disorders and behavioral disorders?
So if you look at the pedagogy, for usually the teaching methods are restricted to school, because the methods that are looking at, they hope that the skills are built by
Yes.
them,
Mm-mm.
right? But because they're adults, what would come in the way is not so much the teaching methods, but the cognitive abilities, because
Okay.
for them to be able, the learning is not a problem, but the retention can be a problem, and their ability to express what they have learned is usually the problem. So it's not so much the pedagogy, but the work on the cognitive abilities, right? So if there are children in your institution where, I don't know where you are, but if you are in Bangalore, we would be happy to sort of offer you some kind of support. We
Okay.
can train interested teachers, we can give you our software, the Rewire, which can be used, and it is quite beneficial for adults with learning difficulties, and there is a lot of progress that can happen by being on the
We're based in
program.
Chennai. Do you have any programs in Chennai, or
We
if we could
don't.
invite you over for a session, would you be that work?
Sure, that is
We will,
possible.
okay,
That is
I'll
possible.
get your contact details and we'll get in touch with you, because some of
Sure,
us really know that we need to change something, but we're just, kind of lost in that space. So
sure.
this was really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think Mr.
Yeah,
Satyanarayana had asked for email ID. If
all
that can be
right.
put in the chat box. Yes, Aradhana, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Wanted to know that the assessments that you do, can it be done in a group also, like the class, the entire class, so that like for it to act as like preventive before they start seeing the problem and it having an impact on language and academics, and like before they figure out what's to be done, like so is there a possibility for that? And now that we are seeing so many more kids who really need some assessment to begin with. So some kind of a screening and like large scale, so that they begin working on before they start seeing the real impact of
Yes.
this onto
Assess.
academics and like language and academics. Like,
Yeah. Assessments cannot be done in group. There are very few assessments that can be done in group, and we're limited by the number of assessments that are available for group testing. However, screening can definitely be done. And executive functions, there are a number of scales. We have our own scale, which we use and is fairly accurate in picking up the executive function deficits. If you read up, and I often quote Adele Diamond, her work has been exclusively focusing on executive functions in children as young as 3-year-olds, and saying that if these children they have differences in their executive functions, if we pick it up early and provide intervention at that level, then they may never reach a stage where they have a diagnosis. They may always be subclinical, and therefore the functioning is way better than if we miss them out.
request you to kindly put a name in the chat, please.
Sure, of the Adele Diamond. Sure, I'll do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also wanted to know that when you talk about like working on attention, so then like there is sometimes a lot of difference between like kind of auditory attention, like when people are very good auditory learners, whereas like no children with LD where they have a lot of difficulty with their reading as well. So so when you are kind of working on the executive function, so you working separately on visual versus separately on auditory, because the improvement graph that you showed, that showed like single improvement in attention. So that is why I was wondering, like.
Yeah, we don't parse it out in terms of visual or auditory. Remember, the cognitive training program has to be individualized. So for some people, we find that the auditory is more difficult than visual. For some people, it's the reverse. So depending on the need of the child, we adapt the program. So for a child who has problems with auditory, we present the material, verbally. For those who have a visual problem, we present the material visually, and then we set targets accordingly. So although that graph, that was just a sort of a representation, not real scores, but just to show you the progression of like parents often ask us, what can we expect as outcome of the program? And
Okay.
this is the progression that we see, right? It's a very simplistic representation of what really happens. And we don't parse out in the beginning itself that, only visual or only auditory. We start off, although primarily with auditory, because a lot of our teaching pedagogy focuses on verbal and auditory methods. And then as they grow, as they climb the difficulty ladder, or if they're older children, we also make visual presentations.
So when you're working on this, have you found a change in children who are actually diagnosed with central auditory processing disorder, CAPD?
Yes, yes. We do
Okay.
see changes in them because the CAPD, again, if you look at it, it is the supramarginal gyrus and the angular gyrus and the temporoparietal junction, which again has the frontoparietal and singular opercular network connections. So working on the executive functions will target these two networks.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Are there any other questions that we are missing out?
Ma'am, there's one in the chat box by Shiva Priyaman. Can the Rewire app replace the offline sessions?
Hmm?
How are the interventions on the app guided?
Okay. So the answer is yes and no. For those who cannot come to us, you definitely have the option of being on the app. The difference that we have seen through our experience is you may have to stay on the app for longer. That's one difference versus, say, if you come to us, if the program takes about 6 months, on the app, it might take 9 months to a year. That's one difference that we see straight away. Two is the motivation to stay on the app because it's the same activity again and again seems to be very, very like difficult to sustain while on the app. And so we try our best, although that's something that we've not been able to achieve so far, unfortunately. We try our best to monitor as much as possible. But if the parents or whoever is with the child on the app can monitor it from their end and then get on call with us once a week, we are happy to handhold and tell you what activities to focus on and then, tailor, make the program to suit their needs. Soon we are in the process of working out this app. Instead of it, currently it's on phones and tabs, we want to make it go online so you can work on your laptop, and even Mac and iPhones, you can work on it if it's network based, and online. Once that is done, then ability to monitor gets better because you can do a screen share and we can sit on one side and observe. So that is also possible, but right now we don't have that option. But maybe like in 2-3 months, that version will be ready. We've already started the process and it's nearing completion. We have to test it out and then it'll be ready to go out in the market.
I have one final question.
Yes, Sarah.
Yeah. We've been hearing a lot about this electro modulation, optic modulation, neuromodulation, and all. So, I mean, what is it like? Does it really impact the networks
Theoretically,
or?
it should. Theoretically, it should. But to be honest, I don't have the expertise to comment on that. But theory-wise, like I said, everything happens because of oscillatory movements and neuromodulation. So any progress will impact and that's what the medication would also address, right? So we do know that there are tall claims that are made. I have not seen any systematic review on physically neuromodulation or electromodulation. So I cannot comment on its efficacy, but theoretically it should bring about change.
And
Is it a
and what
permanent
about
change? I don't know.
auditory? And do you have any idea about the auditory, like Stephen Porges safe and sound protocol, impacting this thing? Do you have any this thing
No,
about that?
no, I have no idea. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? There was one question I thought about CAPD and learning disability.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Just one question I've asked. There's one
Yeah,
question.
Yes,
it's
yes,
like
Gauri.
if
Do you want to ask us that question?
Yes, ma'am. I put it in the chat box.
Okay,
If it's basically a link between CAPD, dyslexia, and language processing disorder, which basically is what my daughter has now.
right.
Since coming to you, she has made a massive improvement. This I have to
Mm-hmm.
tell you,
Mm-hmm.
especially her expression, power of expression, even her situational awareness, responding to stimulus. Basically, her cognitive skills have really gone up, and it is
Mm-hmm.
something which people we have met after 2 years first thing they have told me is she's very different and she's
Mm-hmm.
very much better. people
so
very
pleased to
close to
hear
us who
that.
have observed her. Yes. So it's a huge improvement. So is there a connect between them? And will speech and language therapy help again? Suppose she starts again, she's 24. Most places have turned me away saying she's too old because
Yes.
she's already finished 15 years of, that therapy. So I'm just wondering, will it help if she just goes for maybe one session a week with an expert? Will it help stimulate that? Because that
Not
is her
so much
only main
speech.
deficit.
Yes.
Yes,
What
ma'am.
she probably lacks is more the social skills to
Right,
be
right.
able to be sustaining a conversation, right?
Yes, yes.
While she is
Yes,
happy
ma'am.
to initiate now, which was not there
Yes,
earlier, she
absolutely.
does not
Yes.
know how to
How to
sustain a
continue?
conversation.
Yes,
So
exactly.
it's more a social cognition and social
That
skill deficit
Right,
than a
right, right.
speech deficit. There is
Okay, ma'am.
limitation as far as her speech is concerned, no doubt about it. But
Mm-hmm.
instead of speech therapy, what she would need is probably social skills training,
Right, right. ma'am.
right? And given the other range of difficulties that she presents, the outcome may be limited, but we have seen really good results,
Yes, yes,
working
ma'am.
with her.
There is a huge improvement.
So yes, yes. So
Yes.
social skills training, like more than academic, I would look
Mm.
at social skills training and more skill-based training for her.
Right, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So I'll
Sure,
get back to you with those.
sure,
Thank you so
sure.
much.
Yeah,
Right, ma'am.
yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Are there any other questions that isn't being on the app again increasing screen time? Yes, Sangeeta. That's a question that we get asked frequently. So a total ban on screens, anyway, we know is not practical because we are going into a world which is heavily digital. So what people say is mindless scrolling on screens is what results, in the executive functions, but using it for limited periods of time for specific reasons always is beneficial. We actually used this app to help somebody overcome screen addiction, and he was like really very, very severe screen addiction to a point where he would sleep for 4 hours. He had dropped out of college, and he would be on screens for almost 20 hours a day. 18 to 20 hours he was averaging. From there, now he's gone back and he's almost finishing his engineering. And we worked with 2 months in person and 3 months on Rewire, and that's all we did with him. And of course, continued to see him for therapy, but phenomenal turnaround with this. So it seems to be counter intuitive. I can't explain it. The only way I can explain it is by increasing the impulse control. They're able to say, I've had enough and I won't go back to screens again today. That definitely happens. Uh, before I take any more question, I think Satyanarayana sir is asking, I'm not able to get an OTP on the app. Unfortunately, OTP will not work. Only Gmail will work. So please give a Gmail and then use that as a way to register on the app. Yeah, any other questions that I'm missing out?
There was one in the beginning, right in the beginning. Mamta ma'am asked, what
Hmm.
is the meaning of mental flexibility?
Right. So mental flexibility is your ability to consider or switch between two or more options to be able, like say, for example, you crack a joke and I'm the butt of the joke. I get very angry. Then you come and apologize, right? If I'm inflexible, I will find it difficult to let go of my anger, even though I see merit in your explanation. I hold on to that anger for a very long time. That's one way of explaining mental flexibility. Another is I'm talking. You have told me now it's time to talk, so I will talk. And then you come in and say, okay, talk time is over. So now let's get down to studying. For me to be able to switch out of talking and back into focus on studying, I need mental flexibility. So these are simple examples for you to show where your ability to do two or more activities simultaneously or seamlessly, to be able to go from one to another when the situation demands it. That is what is referred to as mental flexibility. Okay, any other questions that we missed out?
I think, ma'am, we have covered most of it.
Okay, yeah, we've
Even from
really
the chat box. Yes.
extended beyond time. Thank you so much for your questions. Over to you, Arva.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being such a wonderful audience and for participating in this webinar. And thank you so much, Akila ma'am, for such a lovely session. It was really a very insightful session, and everything we could relate it, since we look at it on a daily basis, but there was the dots which were getting connected as and when we were, going through all of your slides. So just as I conclude, so as a neural network becomes stronger through repeated learning and practice, our brain also has an amazing ability to grow and adapt. Cognitive training is not about becoming smarter overnight. It is about strengthening everyday skills such as attention, memory, problem solving, and decision making through consistent practice. Whether you're a child developing new skills, an adult aiming to stay mentally sharp, or an older adult looking to maintain cognitive health, small and regular mental exercises can make a meaningful difference. The key message is that our brains are capable of learning throughout life. With the right guidance, practice, and patience, we can build stronger thinking skills and improve our overall quality of life. Thank you once again for everyone being such a wonderful audience and for participating in today's session. We hope this discussion has given you a better understanding of how the principle of neural networks can help us appreciate the brain's remarkable ability to learn, adapt, and grow. So, thank you once again. And before we end our session, just wanted to let the audience know that our next webinar would be held in the next month, which would be the last Friday of the month. The date would be 28th August. And since we are already, we have come up with the topic is finalized. So the topic is going to be on sibling relationships, understanding the bonds that shape us, which would be done by Priyanka ma'am. So I would encourage all of you all to be a part of our next webinar session as well, which would be in the next month, August 28th. And the details shall be updated as we did for this one as well. Thank you once again, and have a lovely evening ahead and a wonderful weekend ahead.